Hello and good morning, everybody. Welcome into the first episode of Morning Glory, my new podcast. Now, before we do get into the full-on swing of things with this episode, because I do have a lot of things planned to talk about today, I do just want to quickly talk about the fact that this is in fact a new podcast. Okay, obviously, if you're a long-time subscriber, if you're a long-time stan, then you'll probably know that I did have another podcast last year titled The Kitchen Sink, which that title I still fuck with, still love. I think it's a great title for a podcast. And a lot of you were asking why I decided to make a new podcast and didn't just bring The Kitchen Sink back for a second season. So I want to quickly talk about the idea and whatnot for the podcast and the reason why you're currently seeing me in my bed with my eye mask on first thing in the morning. Okay, so basically, long story short, in terms of The Kitchen Sink, she's dead. The reason being is that when I moved flats, I threw away all the set pieces for it. Reason being was because the set never really came to fruition the way I was kind of wanting it to, mainly because I just didn't have the facilities. Obviously, in an ideal world, I'd have a separate studio where I could properly set up a set rather than trying to makeshift a corner in my office. And the thing is, with this new flat, although this new flat is in a lot of ways bigger than my old one in terms of space and just feng shui wise, like where everything fits, it is technically bigger. There was also more ideal space for all the things that I wanted to do. So for like my office, I used to have my office set up in like three different corners, so I had three different things going on. Now the way that room works is it's much longer and not as wide, like it's not as boxy. So because of that reason, I decided to utilize that for my main channel stuff and obviously like normal videos, just to have the background nice and blurred and whatnot, which I love. But that also meant that I then didn't have the corner that I normally would have for the kitchen sink set and whatnot. So I did just get rid of it. Okay. So that was that. And I know what you're thinking, like I could have just continued and done the same, just like a chilled out podcast with that title. But the way my brain works is like if I can't bring it fully to fruition in a creative sense, then it kind of grates on me long term. And like editing the footage and stuff, it was just kind of grating. So I was like, you know what? I kind of want to come up with something different. And for the longest time, me and Liam, my best friend, we were trying to think of something. And there was a lot of ideas floating around of what we could have called our podcast. If you'd like to know some of the ideas in a future episode, then let me know and I can definitely share that with you. But we ended up coming to the conclusion that because obviously we live so far away, it's just not feasible to try and do this together every single week or however often we're planning on doing it. So I said, well, I'm totally down to do a podcast all on my own. And then he's probably going to become the unofficial co-host in a sense. So like you'll probably be seeing quite a lot of Liam just because the idea for this new podcast, obviously it's called Morning Glory. We'll go into the title and why that's there in a sec. But the idea for this podcast was very much chill, just a stream of consciousness, just chatting to you guys on a very human level, because I feel like a lot of the stuff that I put online, I don't necessarily get to do that. I don't get to make many videos where I'm just focusing on just chatting to you guys in a very real sense. So I wanted to do that. Now, the idea for Morning Glory as a title and whatnot and a theme, and once again, why you're seeing me in bed on the first thing in the morning, it stemmed from me thinking, right, well, when do I feel my most relaxed and my most content and chill? And basically, what was my favorite part of the day to try and implement something like this that's obviously going to make something seem even more relaxed than trying to force a relaxed scenario, if that makes sense. And in my brain, my favorite part of every single day is first thing in the morning, because I'm not sure if I'd class myself as a morning person, but I do love the morning, so I guess I would. But I also do love staying up late sometimes. Who knows? I think I'm actually more of a morning person now than I used to be. I used to not gel with mornings at all. Now there's something about waking up, those eyes opening, rolling straight out of bed, me going to flick my coffee machine on. So I do have a coffee here. Getting my eye mask out the freezer, letting it defrost a little bit, because Lord knows I've put it on a bit too early sometimes and nearly got frostbite, right? Hence why I've got it on today. It helps depuff. This is how I spend my morning, people. So that was kind of like the theme of the podcast that I wanted to try and emulate, is like we're waking up together, right? This is how I tend to spend my mornings. Why not just film it every once in a while? So that was the idea for the podcast, and hopefully this chill energy is coming across. And I also think I'm going to be uploading each of these episodes both to YouTube and obviously to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm going to be uploading them early on the morning. So we really can be waking up together if you guys see fit. Obviously you can still listen and watch whatever, but I think that's a really nice concept. So that's what I wanted to do with this podcast. So in terms of talks and whatnot, and what topics and stuff I'm going to be getting into, it's going to literally be how I'm feeling in that morning. I'm not really going to focus on note taking and stuff and scripting stuff, because I don't think I work very well under those restrictions. So it's going to be very much stream of consciousness. I've already filmed 2 episodes with Liam when he was up here. They're very that. We always tend to have very bullshit conversations that kind of jump from one thing to the next. So yeah, and I love watching podcasts like these. Like I recently have been getting into Madeline RG. Now I'd never heard of her before, and one of her podcast episodes came up on my like recommended on YouTube. So I watched it, and a lot of hers is like kind of talking a bit more existentially about like friendship, life, navigating certain things, like the difficult things that people don't talk about. And I feel not that I'm equipped, because I don't know if I am, but I feel prepared, and I also feel very open to talk about some stuff that maybe people shouldn't talk about on the internet, maybe, but who knows? And that's what we will be doing today in today's episode. So strap on in for that. And I'm sorry that this intro is a bit lengthy, but I think it's some stuff that you guys might be interested in. And then last thing, in terms of the title, I had another title planned that was much more PG, didn't really say as much as I wanted it to, but it was kind of the only thing that I could think of. I had a few options, but I told my mum, like I kind of filled my mum in on what I was thinking for the podcast and like the theme and everything, and how I wanted it to be like we're waking up together, that kind of thing. And she came up with a few ideas, some being shitty, like, you know, like your typical rise and shine that I feel like is like the most bog standard you could choose. So that was an instant no. But then she jokingly / half seriously, I think, said Morning Glory. And I was like, that is perfect. Like, obviously it has the normal connotation, but I also think for the theme that I'm kind of going for, I think Morning Glory works so well, because I do enjoy the mornings, and I'm also bringing a bit of, hopefully, glory to your morning, in a very stupid sense. That's kind of where I took it. So yeah, I instantly ran with that. I ran with Morning Glory. I think it's a great title. Hopefully you guys understand a bit more now why it's called Morning Glory, in relation to what I want the podcast to be about. So yeah, obviously I did make the little teaser / I don't know if it's going to be some sort of intro for these episodes. I don't know, but I'm really proud of the little teaser. Me and Liam shot that when he was up here last weekend. And yeah, hopefully you like the vibes. But with all that said, I do just want to get into this episode, like the actual portion of the episode, because this was a little bit of a preliminary for you all. I'm unsure right now whether this podcast is going to be weekly or bi-weekly, just because I don't want to burn myself out with it. And I think if I give myself 2 weeks between episodes, then a lot more things can happen, which will mean a lot more things I can talk about, you know? So who knows? I'll let you know properly whether it's going to be a weekly or bi-weekly, because I already have 3 episodes planned. So maybe I can start off weekly, and then we'll see. I might have to take it down to bi-weekly if I get a bit overwhelmed with everything else that goes on in my life. So yeah, that's that in terms of upload schedule. And they're going to be every Sunday, or maybe bi-weekly, of course. But for now, I think it'll be every Sunday at 10 a.m, bright and early. But yeah, let's actually get into the talk. Today, I'm actually going to be catching you guys up, because since we spoke in such a frank way, I think I ended the podcast last year in like June. a lot has happened in terms of my mental health and my mental well-being, and I've kind of been through the trenches and also back. So, and I'm currently not in the trenches. I'm actually feeling the best I've ever felt now. So, I do want to kind of talk to you guys about kind of what's been going on and what I've been struggling with outside of like my career and YouTube and all this stuff, right? So, there's some alarm going off. That's quite rude. Hopefully my microphone's not capturing that. I don't actually know what that could possibly be. Is it some sort of fire alarm somewhere? Maybe. No, I tend to leave my mask on for 15 minutes, and we're coming up to the 15-minute mark, so I will take it off in a minute and you can actually see my face, but this is just how I start my morning, okay? Okay, so the overarching topic for today is loneliness, right? And loneliness is something that I've really struggled with, I'd say, since uni. And don't get me wrong, obviously, like, for a while afterwards, I was fine. I was kind of here, there, and everywhere, seeing friends. But I think the thing that's kind of fucked me over a lot is that I'm no longer in the dance industry, which is obviously what I went to uni for. And like all my friends have stayed within the dance industry, which has kind of meant that most of my friends live down London and I do not. So I've had several spouts of major loneliness over the past few years, simply because like I'd love to move to London, but the idea of actually moving and then being in London, like physically, I really don't know if that would be for me, because I don't think it necessarily gels well with my ideal day-to-day life. Realistically, like, I'm really happy being in a flat alone. My work is all work from home, obviously. Like, there's not an office that I have to go to. So like part of me thinks like I'd just be paying crazy rent in London for no reason. Like I'd be in my house regardless. And realistically, you do also just get a better bang for your buck, in a sense, in terms of like flats and stuff for your money. You know, like, I would not be able to get this flat for this amount of money down London. That's just not possible. So it'd be quite a sacrifice on that end too. So basically, long story short, I won't be moving to London, although I would really like to, because obviously I think I'd have a much more of a fruitful social life. And that's been one of the main things that's like really been getting to me. Like, I think a lot of times with young people, there's a major pressure. One sec. Oh, I really hope my microphone's not picking up whatever the fuck that noise is, because typical, the one morning that I decided to film in my bedroom alone, there's a really loud alarm going off. But yeah, I feel like for young people these days, I think there's a real pressure on trying to be social and having a big social life. And if you're not out every week, going out, getting drunk, doing drugs, because best believe that's a big part of it, then you're not really doing young life well. And I've never really been interested in those sort of things. Obviously, I love going out in moderation. Obviously, not in uni, but we can kind of get into why I feel like I was going out a lot more in uni. Obviously, uni's one thing, but just in general day-to-day life, like, I do tend to think that going out to the club can get a bit monotonous, a bit boring, because there's not much that changes between times and like between nights out, you know? So I've never been the most like, I want to go out several times a week, get fucked off my face. And like, that's just not something that's made me feel fulfilled. And I think specifically since uni, kind of growing into a proper adult, because obviously I know by the time you're 18, you're technically an adult. I get it. Numbers say so. Even 16, I suppose. But obviously, even when you're technically classed as an adult, there's a certain level of growth that you still have to do to understand what kind of adult you want to be, right? And I think I have done that a lot over the past few years, and I kind of came to the conclusion that staying at home makes me happy. And I was having a conversation with Liam about this past weekend, which is kind of like why I think it'd be interesting to you guys, maybe just in case anyone feels the same way. And I'm sure there is a lot of people that feel the pressure of being young and having a crazy social life. I have just come to the conclusion where I am my most content. Like, yes, I love going to see my family. That's one reason why I love staying where I'm at is because I'm close to my family. My sister had a baby not too long ago, like she's not even 1 year old. So my niece was born like last March. And obviously if I was in London, I wouldn't be able to see her as often. I've been able to see her really often. So I've obviously loved that about it. But just in general, taking all that out of the equation, I love being at home alone, having a chilled evening, being productive because, funnily enough, I love my job. I am proud of my job. I love being creative. So even when I'm not necessarily doing my job, like my off time and my time for myself, especially these days, is spent being creative in some way, whether that's drawing, making other stuff, like taking pictures, I don't know, like literally anything. Mostly at this point in time, it's being creative in terms of drawing and art. And I am creating a website that's gonna be just like helping me in that sense and like making it so I can make more stuff and like I can also share that with you guys and that you can enjoy that, which I think would bring me a lot of joy. So I am working on that. So soon there is going to be a platform where my art will become available to you guys, and if you guys want to sport it in your own homes, like I think that's going to be a level of fulfillment for me that I've not felt before. So that's also got me excited. But yeah, so a lot of my spare time these days is just spent kind of bettering myself. Like I've been trying to go to the gym more, but the main reason why I'm kind of having this outlook currently is because around September, October time, I went through probably the darkest time of my life. Now, this is going to get pretty dark, this section, I suppose, of the episode. So I'm sorry, but you've been warned in advance. Not dark in the sense of like harming myself, that kind of thing. Like that's not going to be a topic here. But dark in the sense of depression. So if anything to do with depression and feeling low and body, I'm going to be talking about my body in a very blunt format. So if that is something that you're not comfortable with, then just know now I won't judge you for turning off if that's something that you don't like to hear about. So last year, I went on holiday with obviously Liam a few times, and I went on holiday with my parents in September, which I haven't done in a very long time. I think the last time I went on holiday with my parents was, God, I think it might have been like second year of uni. So that would be like 2017. So it was 5 years since I'd been on a family holiday, right? So I decided to go with them last year. Had a wonderful time. We stayed in a lovely villa. We went to see my sister perform because she was working over in Greece at the time. So had a wonderful time. But I do see that as maybe the start of or the catalyst for kind of how I felt in, I'd say, maybe the 2 months following that, because there was a few little comments said here and there. Obviously, like my family maybe don't know how severely that I struggle with my body and body image and body dysmorphia. I feel like I have spoken about it a little bit here and there, maybe in a previous podcast episode, who knows, but I feel like I've spoken about that a lot, and I suffer a lot with body dysmorphia. For a while, I was kind of thinking like, it wasn't the idea of body dysmorphia that I had originally thought, because I think when you're in school and you're taught about it, I think the way they make it sound is that you're going to look in the mirror and you're psychologically going to see a different image back at you. And I who knows, maybe that's what some people experience. I don't experience that. I don't know if that is actually true. I've not done my research into it, but the way they made it sound and the imagery that was used, it kind of made me think like, oh, it's like, so I'm actually going to see a completely different image looking back at me. Now, I'm sure some people maybe experience that on more of a psychological level, but for me, like, mine was much more of a feeling, and mine is much more of a feeling. Like when I do feel shit about myself and my body, it's much more of a feeling than it is a physical thing. Yes, I look in the mirror, and yes, I'll be more in tune and notice more the imperfections, but it's not like my body changes. Does that make sense? So like, I guess there is a physical aspect of like my brain does see and chooses to hone in on more of the imperfections and maybe the flabby parts of my body or the parts that I'd like to change more than normal. But my body isn't changing, and I also am aware that my body isn't changing, but my brain is just unable to stop thinking about these things. And I let those things really take over my whole brain and existence and outlook of myself. And that's kind of how I've been experiencing body dysmorphia, and that's what I know to be body dysmorphia, because other people that I've spoken to, they do have a similar time, and I mean, realistically, it's very prevalent in the dance industry. Like I was around a lot of people that were going through a lot of difficulties in terms of their image, obviously through uni. I mean, I did go to a ballet school, so I'm sure you can imagine. So yeah, that was a lot of my trouble moving forward. So I had a lot of body image issues, and it kind of progressively got worse through September, October, and then it was kind of the end of October where it kind of came to a head. And from me obviously feeling shit about myself, I've had obviously spouts of that in the past, but this was the first time where I really feel like it had taken a turn from being strictly just like me feeling shit about my body and maybe partaking in unhealthy habits in order to get things under control, i.e., not barely eating, but controlling my eating to the max. And then if I did let myself loose a little bit and maybe let myself have a takeaway, then I would be severely nasty to myself. Like I would be really horrible to myself for a very long time following that. So that was a very rare thing because I knew the way my brain worked and the way that if I did let that happen, then I just knew that it would just make everything worse. So I just didn't. So it was a very controlled environment that I put on myself around those 2 months specifically. And I will say, I do think, now I don't use this word lightly because I do definitely agree that I'm sure some people experience this on a much broader scale and a much life-altering scale and a lengthier scale than I do. But I do think I had my first taste of depressive tendencies and qualities. Now, I'm not just going to sit here and say that I'm depressed because I feel like, not to invalidate anybody, but I do think that word gets thrown around a lot. And I do obviously believe, especially in this day and age, with how much is going on in the media, and that this was also a big reason why this was getting worse for me. Like, obviously, I was already feeling shit about my body. There was the whole gym factor and the guilt that came with me not wanting to go to the gym because the way, now I didn't really know this at the time, and looking back now I'm like, oh, this makes total sense, because from what I've heard from people in my life that have been depressed and do suffer from depression on a much lengthier scale, I do know that obviously when you are depressed, you want to be doing things, but the thought of doing those things is like the furthest thing from what you want. Does that make any sense? Maybe I'm not describing this very well, but I just know that like you want to be productive and you want to change things because you're hating things about what's going on, but the energy to do so is just not there. Obviously, I was hating my body, and then in turn, when that usually comes about with me, I tend to then, like I said, control my environment, torture myself, basically, force myself to go to the gym for the wrong reasons, because I'm a big advocate for the gym. Obviously, I think it's a great thing, and I think it really does help, not just physically, mentally, for sure. And we'll get into more about that maybe in a later episode. But this was the first time where the trajectory of usually my shitty moments in terms of my body dysmorphia didn't necessarily align with what I'd previously experienced, because I was actively wanting to go to the gym because obviously that's what I was used to, but there was something happening to me which now I believe to be a little spout of depression, where I just didn't have the energy to do it. But then it was like a circular thing. It was like I was wanting to better my body because I knew that that would make me feel better, but I didn't have the energy or the willpower or whatever to do so. So I'd constantly feel shit. So for a good 2 months, I was feeling really, really negative about myself, until it basically came to a head around Halloween. So for Halloween, I'd planned to wear a certain outfit for Batman, which I mean, there's a vlog on my main channel, so obviously, like, I did end up going out, but there was so much that happened kind of on Halloween, and my mindset was just not correct. And I've had conversations with my best friend and my sister because they were with me at the time. I've had conversations specifically with my best friend where like he and her could both tell that mentally I was in a different place. Like every little thing that happened on social media, because obviously my career is this, it is social media. So I'm sure you guys all know, but with social media comes opinions, and sometimes those opinions aren't very nice. So around that time, every little thing that was happening or not happening, or comments that I was receiving that were also kind of attacking me and like wearing down my appearance or whatever, my personality, whatever. It was literally anything. Any sort of negativity that I was receiving around that time was just kind of confirming what I was already feeling about myself. Liam, because we had this conversation recently, so I do want to mention what he said because it actually makes total sense. And apparently he was just asked by his family, like, oh, how I was doing, whatever, because I'm pretty close with Liam's family. Like, I've spent some time with them, so they tend to ask how I am and whatnot. And my family, vice versa, with Liam, because we've been friends for a long time. So they just simply asked Liam, like, how I was doing, whatever. And he apparently described me as bothered, like very bothered around that time. And that makes total sense because that is just how it was how I was feeling. Like I was feeling bothered, I was feeling irritated, and I definitely can tell how I treated those two people in my life very differently on Halloween. And around that time, on the same evening even, other comments were made by other members of my family that any other time I would be able to just laugh off and I really wouldn't give a shit. And it was like just like this the kind of the thing that I was hitting on earlier when I was on holiday with my family. I don't think they understand or even know the severity of like the shit that I go through in terms of my body, because I've not really spoken to them about it, which I'm sure I could do. I speak to my family about a lot of things, and I'm sure I've mentioned it flippantly, but I've never gone into detail about how severe it can be sometimes. So obviously it's not their fault. Like they know me as quite a bubbly, happy person usually that can take a joke. So obviously they were maybe just trying to banter me, I don't know. But that then basically really made me spiral on Halloween to the point where I was almost ready to just not go out. I was ready to get changed, hated what I was wearing. I was so in my head, and I was like, I remember saying to them both, I was like, do I look fat? And I'm not sitting here saying that being plus size and overweight, whatever, having a bit of weight on you is a bad thing. Absolutely not. Like because actively, I don't prefer seeing myself skinny. Like I've been skinny, I've been thin. I was also pretty depressed then, going through shit then, which I think I've spoken about, like that my whole cruise ship experience. I wasn't doing well mentally then, so it's not like I tie being skinny to being happy, because that's not the truth. So I want to get that out of the way. Like I'm not sitting here and saying that to be happy I need to be skinny. That's not the case. So yeah, so I was just feeling really shit about myself, and then Halloween was kind of the pinnacle of that, both with social media, with my appearance, with family life, literally everything. Everything was irritating me, everything was bothering me. And I kind of got to a point where I was like, right, I need to change something up here. I need to change something. I can't keep going at the rate that I'm going, because it's just not me. It's not me. It's not enjoyable, obviously. I love being productive. I didn't want to be productive. I was barely wanting to work. Like I love getting up and get going. Like I just enjoy it. So I was like, I can't keep doing this. And I had a chat with myself, and I was like, look, we've got to sort something out. And I was like, something's got to give, something's got to change. And I discovered, for me, social media was the thing that needed to change. I deleted Instagram, I deleted Twitter pretty soon after Halloween. I stopped uploading. I'm pretty sure I stopped uploading for a while first before I properly deleted them. Now I don't know why it sounds so severe to us to even delete an app. Like it's that easy, but I think we're all so in tune with the apps and like it being glued to our hands that it feels weird. Like there's a uncomfortability that comes with like not going on your phone, and it's so weird that we see it as an achievement if we're able to just not go on our phone for a few hours. So yeah, basically, I decided to cut off social media. I stopped uploading for the most part. I would obviously like re-download it if I needed to put up a story about a video or whatever. But for the most part, I wasn't personally posting updates and stuff like in like pictures, which I had been doing quite regularly up to that point. I didn't read the comments. Now, obviously, I've heard many YouTuber, many social media personality say that looking at the comments is the root of all evil and it's not going to help you ever mentally. And you know what? Up to now, I've been like, oh yeah, all right, whatever. I'm pretty strong. I can handle this. Right? This is the thing. Getting into this industry, I was like, oh, I don't know if I'll be going through the same things that I've seen, obviously, all these other personalities go through, because I did think of myself as quite a strong-willed person that didn't necessarily let outside people's perspectives dictate how I live my life and how I feel about myself. Lo and behold, I did. So even if you're watching this and you're trying to get into social media, and even if you think that you're not going to be bothered by it, trust and believe there's going to come a time where you probably are going to be bothered by it. Because best believe, I was bothered by it. And I was like, right, I'm going to delete social media. I'm going to go to the gym for the right reasons. I'm going to better myself. I'm going to eat healthy. But I'm also going to let myself have a snack here and there. I'm going to let myself have time off from work, because side to side for me is like, if I feel shit about my body, and yes, I'm controlling my body and what I'm eating, I'm also forcing myself to work ungodly hours. Now, I know a lot of people, now I got told this at Christmas, and this is the proof of how my mental state is so much better these days, because a member of my family that I don't see very regularly, and I don't plan on seeing very regularly moving forward, like kind of made a joke, or maybe just a jab in general. I don't think it was necessarily a ha-ha joke that they were trying to accomplish, but they basically took a dig at me and said, like, because we were kind of talking about work and people, because basically most of my family work at the same place, and it's like factory work. So like they were kind of like speaking about work and whatever, and like the difficulty and whatever and all that kind of thing. And then we kind of got onto the topic of my work and how realistically, not to make this about money at all, but this was part of the conversation, I am a bit more successful in terms of money than most of my family. And obviously, like, what I do for work is so unconventional in comparison to what they're doing, because these are the type of people that don't really know YouTube, or like they've had to learn to know YouTube. And that was a whole thing when I first started doing this. And I actually would love to talk to you guys about, in maybe a future episode, kind of a conversation that I had with my dad on his 50th birthday, because there was progressions there that I didn't even know weighed heavy on my dad, but obviously he got very drunk, and like he like told me certain things that I'd wanted to hear, but it was so therapeutic to hear. So yeah, let me know if you'd like to hear some of those stories from what happened on my dad's 50th, because it was a really fun time, but because he was so drunk, there was things that were said that was like actually quite heartwarming to hear from him. But yeah, so this family member came just after Christmas to give my dad his birthday gift, and he kind of made a jab of like, oh, I imagine it's so difficult doing your job, like sitting around all day, growing a beard, like essentially diminishing any sort of work that actually goes into this job. Now, I know a lot of YouTubers hire editors. They don't do videos that necessarily mean they have to sit down for hours on end to even complete the video. And I know in that instance how that can look. But someone who does have fingers in several pies, as it were, like obviously I have my main channel, so I do that. And obviously I record all my own stuff, I edit my own stuff, I do all of it myself, I do my own thumbnails. There actually is a lot of work that goes into it. Like, I'm pretty busy most days. So to hear a member of my family that obviously doesn't really know me, doesn't know much about me, doesn't care to know much about me, and that's fine, kind of say that, I was like, oh, this is so funny. But give me that comment 2 months ago, and that would have really affected me. So I think that just shows how much my mental state had improved from the end of October. And I do put it solely down to getting off social media, because a lot of it for me was I'd go on social media, I'm comparing myself to all these people, because at your fingertips, you're seeing all these people happy, or so we think, in relationships, with great bodies. Obviously, editing is a whole thing, right? I've been privy to it myself. I'm not secretive about that. But yeah, so like the ideal life is kind of displayed on social media, as well as around this time. Now, this was another big thing. I am worried to speak about this because I'm unsure how people will react. But obviously, around this time also, a lot of shit was going down in the news. It felt like to me, and I mentioned this to my friend, it felt like to me every day I'd log on to social media, I'd see something else that had gone wrong, people attacking people, people dying, people talking shit. And obviously not just the stuff that's happening in Gaza and Palestine and that whole thing, but literally just every day there was something else. Like there was attacks on trans people, people's rights are being taken away, just so much all at once. And it felt like every day I couldn't get away from it. Every time I went online, there was something else to be sad about. And rightly so, like it's disgusting stuff, but it just kind of got overwhelming to the point where like, now maybe this is cowardly of me. I hold my hands up and say that like in that moment I did feel like a bit of a coward and a bit of a failure, and I feel like I should have been able to withstand a bit more. But that was another reason why I had to get off social media, because I don't think it's healthy for us as people to have so much at our fingertips, be able to experience things that are happening. And yes, it's important. Of course, it's important for us to know and to hopefully change and educate ourselves. I get that. But I also think it's really fucking hard to have to deal with stuff like that on the day-to-day basis. Things that aren't even happening near us, that were obviously being shown graphically every day on social media. And like I said, yes, it's important to know and for us to stand up for what we believe in, of course, but that also doesn't mean that it's not fucking hard. It's really hard. So yeah, that was another thing, as well as everything else, that was also just meaning that I needed this social media break. And that was the best thing that I'd ever done. Obviously, it took a few days to really get into the swing of things and it to feel normal. And I began to really enjoy not being on social media and not caring what's going on social media. Now, I did have to obviously re-download a few times to obviously post things that were important for my career or brand deals or partnerships that I'd already agreed to before my little hiatus. So that was the only time that I'd be re-downloading and posting. But other than that, I was just focusing on benefiting myself. And I think I would urge you guys, if you are ever feeling a bit overwhelmed with everything, and it doesn't have to be long, even if it's just one day, I think it's really important to give yourself a bit of time just to get back in touch with who you are and what you believe in and what you want to do and what you see for yourself. And I also think it also made me realize all of this kind of came to a head with just me stopping social media, which I know is that's an easy solution, right? And I know for a lot of people, it's not as easy as that. But for me, I just know that works. Getting off social media, it works. Because then I just began to like focus on being creative and drawing. I'd not drawn and painted in such a long time. And since October, I have drawn so much stuff, and I've been obviously posting them all on my like gay saucy art page and stuff, and I've been really feeling fulfilled creatively. And that I've been going to the gym, I've been bettering myself in a healthy way. And like if I do let myself have a day off the gym, I'm not feeling shit about myself. If I choose to have a takeaway, I'm not feeling shit about myself. And it's just because I'm not being constantly forced to see what everybody else looks like and how good their lives are. It just isn't helpful for me. And yeah, I guess like a lot of it also, and the reason why I feel like loneliness was a big topic for me and something that I've struggled with was around this same time I was also feeling my most lonely in terms of not having a relationship, because I mean I've made this known, I'm sure, but I have been single for nearing on 6 years, and as someone who doesn't love hookups, I've done my fair few, obviously I'm human, but as someone who doesn't love hookups, doesn't feel fulfilled after hookups, which I'm sure some people do, it just doesn't really work for me. For a while, I was kind of like getting myself into these scenarios to try and feel fulfilled because I wasn't able to fulfill myself. So I was kind of looking for validation both on social media, in flippant hookups, whatever. Obviously protected. That's never been a thing for me. Always protected sex, please, people, please. I'm a major advocate for that, which I know is not unheard of in the gay community, but it's not always the case. So I would like to just insert that here. Please be protected and be safe. Even if you are hooking up regularly, whatever, like it's a completely natural thing, but just please do it safe for your benefit and others. But anyway, that's besides the point. So yeah, around the same time, September, October, I was also feeling shitty about men and feeling lonely. And that kind of just went hand in hand with me feeling shit about myself and my body, because I felt so undesirable and felt like no one wanted me. I was going to be alone forever. These things, right? And I was at the peak of my really wanting a relationship, like actively really, really wanting it. I don't think I'd ever felt that lonely and that desperate for a relationship before. And it's so interesting, a development that I didn't even see happening, because I didn't think there was a way in which I could just not want a relationship or whatever. I'm so content with being alone. I'm so content with being alone, and this whole thing, to like maybe round up this episode, I don't know, because I don't want it to be too long, and I feel like I've been all over the place, so I'm sorry if this has been a bit crazy and like hard to follow, but it's kind of crazy to me because I feel like, and I spoke to Liam about this too, back when I got out of my last relationship, which was in 2018, I believe, and it was a relationship where I didn't choose to end it. I made the promise to myself that, because I had a really rough time with that breakup, I kind of came to the conclusion where I'm going to make myself happy in whatever sense that was. And I feel like I was tricking myself for years. Up until maybe 3 months ago, I was tricking myself into thinking that I'd done that and I'd made myself happy and I was ready for a relationship and I could get into a relationship for the right reasons. And don't get me wrong, the way I looked at relationships, even like a few years ago, compared to what I used to get into relationships for, was different. But I feel like today and this past few months is the first time I can properly say that I actually make myself happy in every aspect of the word, which I will say is a very liberating thing to say, especially after following such a dark time. And I just think it's so important for us to, all in all, just get in touch with who we are at the core of things, taking out of the equation social media and societal standards, all of it. Just get off your phone, go outside, touch some grass, be creative if that fulfills you, do what you enjoy for an extended period of time, and try and tell me that doesn't benefit you in any way. I don't know. It's helped me. It's helped me a lot. I feel so much clarity and like lighter. Guys, I feel so much lighter day to day. And I feel like it's maybe this is just me being stupid, but I feel like it's also like the positivity that I feel inside kind of feeds itself into every avenue of my life. Like, I'm restarting this podcast, I'm being creative, I'm drawing, I'm making a website, I'm making a clothing line, I'm working in a stable format, I'm going to the gym, I'm seeing my family members, I'm seeing my friends, I'm eating well, I'm taking up new hobbies. This is another thing. I'm taking up baking. I've been trying to knit. Like, I've been trying to get into games. Like, I think taking up new hobbies besides being on your phone and like just doing other things. There's so much that life has to offer that I feel like we don't enjoy and we don't experience just because we're so fixated on this slab of fucking technology that we have in our hands every fucking day. And don't get me wrong, like, some days I am on it pretty regularly, but some days I'm not. And it's a beautiful thing. And it's moderation. And I think that's it. I think that's all I have to say. I'm sure there's more things that I could go into and I could keep rambling on, but I'm going to try and make this as short as possible. I'm sorry if this was a deep one, but I do think this is the way this podcast maybe might go. I do want to talk about more topics that are a bit more, I don't know, not as talked about online. So if there is topics that you'd specifically like me to talk about in depth, and like even if it's just like toxic friends and certain situations that you find yourself in and whatnot, because I do see myself still doing some advice episodes, which I obviously did do for the kitchen sink, because I do think that will just it'll naturally progress into that, I think, because I do love giving people advice on anything. So yeah, let me know your thoughts on this down in the comments below if you're watching this on YouTube. Please do like, subscribe, whatever, share with your friends. It really does help me out. And if you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please do give me a 5-star review and just share your thoughts or whatever. I don't know how these things work, but yeah. And with all that said, I think I'm just going to leave this episode here because I feel like I've been all over the place. But yeah, thank you for watching if you've made it to this point. Or thank you for listening, and I hope to see you again next time. Bye, guys. Bye.